Hi, everyone. I'm Carly.
And I'm Sophia.
And this is Away She Goes, a podcast from her adventures.
Each episode will help you feed your wanderlust with travel tips, stories, inspiration, and more. Away she goes.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Away She Goes. We have a very special episode planned for you today. We do always, but today's a little bit extra special. Today, Sophia and I are going to be talking about some famous and well-known female travelers throughout history, some background information on them, and how they've inspired modern travel and maybe discovered different parts of the world, and how they've led to travel being what it is today, especially for women.
Let's start chronologically. Well, in order. So let's start with Gudrid Thorbjornadottir. I'm sorry, Icelandic people, I still probably mispronounced that slightly, which is her last name is daughter of Thorbjorn. I kind of really appreciate that cultural thing where you name people like daughter of, son of.
Somebody. If someone's father's name is Anders, their last name would be Anderson. Yeah. I love that about Iceland. That was I learned that while I was there, and it was just so interesting to me that they do that way.
Anyway, Gudrid was born in 958 and lived until 1050. She was known as an Icelandic Viking explorer, and she was also said to be the most traveled woman of the Middle Ages. She crisscrossed the North Atlantic several times, mostly between Greenland and Iceland, and she did this 5 centuries before Columbus, where she sailed to North America to a place called Wineland, which today...
Sounds like my kind of place.
Yes. And you're like, Wineland, California? No, it's Newfoundland. And she sailed there with her husband, Thorstein, who sadly died in Wineland, which then, a while after, she moved back to Iceland, married another guy whose name also starts with Thor, which is Thorfinn. Then again, together, they went back to Wineland and had a son there named Snorri, who was reportedly the first European to be born in the Western Hemisphere. But they left Wineland a few years later because they had some conflict with the locals, and they, unlike many other explorers, didn't want to be dicks. Then she had another child, and once their children were both married and out of the house, she converted to Christianity and even did a pilgrimage to Rome.
The other Wineland.
Wineland.
Wineland
yes.
number 2. All right. Next we have Saida Al-Hura, who's also known as Noble Lady Who is Free and Independent. Girl, same. All right. So she was born in 1485 and she lived until 1561, and she was Moroccan, and she was a Mediterranean pirate queen. Her real name is unknown. So the Noble Lady Who is Free and Independent obviously was a nickname of sorts for her.
The coolest nickname in history, probably.
The coolest nickname ever. She was born of Muslim origin, and she was born in Grenada in 1492. It was an important year for people. That was when Columbus came to America. In 1492, Spanish monarchs conquered the Muslim kingdom of Grenada, murdering and enslaving 100,000 Muslims and forcing 20,000 to flee. 1492, man.
That's
what a
crazy.
Year. People complain about 2020. Her family fled to Morocco, and she plotted revenge. So she married another refugee who also happened to be the governor of Tetuan. Her husband died, and then she declared herself the governor.
That's a cool move.
And gave herself the title of Al-Hura, which is queen, which was part of her nickname. She made an alliance with Barbary pirates who at that time were like reigning over the Mediterranean Sea. And she used some of the money from the ship lootings and the robberies that they did to help make her city better. And it's possible, it's a little bit up in the air whether this actually happened, it looks like, but she possibly took the governor of Portugal's wife hostage for a ransom. And she eventually ended up marrying the king of Morocco, but never gave up her governor duties or her pirating duties.
Because who would give up pirating
Yeah,
duties?
she's a badass. Look at her go.
Yes.
So I think it's interesting though, because like one would argue, okay, she's looting and she's stealing, she's doing this bad thing, but then she turned around and like used it for good. She used it to help herself and to help the people around her. So I respect it. That's a really cool story.
Yeah, instead of increasing taxes to have more money for the city, you just
go out there and steal it yourself.
Yep, become allies of pirates. There you go. Next, we have Jeanne Barré, who was born in 1740 and lived until 1807. She was the first female to circumnavigate the globe. Back then, she was disguised as a man with her chest bound, and she conspired with her lover to go on the 1766 expedition around the globe. The two of them exposed themselves, well, rather, she exposed herself 2 years later, and they decided to stay on Mauritius for a little while and call that their home, little patch of paradise. But she later returned to France in the 1770s, completing the circle and becoming the first female to circumnavigate the globe.
Goals.
Yep.
I've heard a lot about her. There are several books written about her that they're on my TBR, which is ever growing, obviously, as we all know. But yeah, there are a few books about her that I've been wanting to read. Her whole story is just fascinating to me. All right, next we have Ida Laura Pfeiffer. She was born in 1797 and she lived until 1858. She was an Austrian explorer. She was a travel writer, an ethnographer, which basically is like a combination of anthropology and the systematic study of cultures. So it's studying anthropology, but it also is other
Studying
cultural
cultures.
things. Yeah. So she grew up in Vienna and she was known to be a wild child. Her first trip was at the age of 5 to Palestine and Egypt, and her father was a textile manufacturer. So that's why she got to go to, those kind of places. She protested against Napoleon's occupation. She loved Robinson Crusoe, and she embarked on her world travels at age 45 once her kids found work, which goes to show you it's never too late to start traveling.
Never.
She wrote journals about her travels to finance her travels, also goals.
Yeah, so like a digital nomad before digital
nomads.
They're a thing.
Her journals ended up eventually being translated into 7 different languages. She traveled 32,000 kilometers by land and about 240,000 by sea, including 2 trips around the world. And she also helped discover new species of snails, prawns, spiders, and turtles all throughout her travels. She was a member of the Geographical Societies of Berlin and Paris, but she was forbidden to enter the Royal Geographical Society because she was a woman. And at that time, women were not allowed to join that society. Isabel Bird came along later, and that was allowed after that, but not yet. And her final journey was to Madagascar, where she accidentally became an accessory to conspiracy against the Queen of Madagascar and was expelled from Madagascar.
That's just a crazy story that we're all always hoping never happens to us.
I think she and our pirate queen would have been good friends.
Oh, yeah.
I'm getting that vibe from both. That I think they would have gotten along very well if they would have been travel buddies. They would have just like left like a path of like piracy in their wake. They would just like had such a wild time.
Next, we have Mary Seacole, who lived from 1805 to 1881. She was a groundbreaking global healer from Jamaica. She was from British Jamaican descent, and she was a nurse, a businesswoman, and an author. She loved to travel just to escape the limits of the Victorian era at the time. She wrote an entire autobiography titled Mrs. Seacole in Many Lands, which is a really great title in my opinion. She later set up a hotel, quote unquote, she called it a hotel, at the lines of the Crimean War to treat the wounded servicemen and put her nursing degree to work. And she was later awarded the Jamaican Order of Merit and also the title Greatest Black Briton.
Wow. I would have called it more a hospital than a hotel.
Yeah, me too, but whatever floats your boat.
Yeah. All right. Next, we have Gertrude Bell. She was born in 1868. She passed away in 1926. She was known as the Queen of the Desert. We have another queen. Queen of the Desert. She was an English writer and a politician, and she had many travels, but she mainly focused on the Middle East, which was her favorite part of the world, understandably. Fluent in many languages: Arabic, Persian, French, German, some Italian, and some Ottoman languages. And she mainly reported on like Mesopotamian politics, and she was involved in a lot of like political meddling. She also had a lot of influence, though. She was very powerful as she helped to get the Hashemite, which is the royal family of Jordan, to power in Iraq. So she had a pretty significant level of influence there. She was the first to argue that antiques should stay in their country of origin. And she helped to build the Archaeological Museum of Baghdad. So she had a massive influence on the Middle East, and even some things in the Middle East that you might see today, she had an input on.
That's really cool. I'm just kind of sad that her idea of antiques should stay in the country of origin didn't really catch on in the rest of her country.
Or anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, true. Next up, we have Bessie Coleman, who was also known as Brave Bessie. She lived from 1892 to 1926. She was the first African-American pilot and also the first woman with an international pilot license. Growing up, she was from a very poor family of farmers, but she loved reading and she also loved math in school. So she went to uni for a year, but then her resources depleted, so she had to quit. She moved to Chicago with some of her brothers and did manicures to earn some money, which in the salon then she heard crazy stories from the female pilots, and that's when she decided she wants to be a pilot too, but was rejected from all the flight schools in her state or in her area. But luckily, there were some influential Black folks from the community that helped her financially. So she took French classes, and then in 1920, she went to France. She was the only student of color in her course and made her license within a year. So she returned to the US in 1921, where she did many interviews and was admired by Black and white folks just alike. She participated in many flight shows. She had some accidents, but she recovered from most of them until, sadly, in 1926, she died on a plane flight with her new plane, Jenny, where she was ejected from the plane. Remember, folks, they weren't always as closed as we know them now. They were just very open, so she was just ejected from the plane. And that's crazy. But get this, 10,000 people came to her funeral.
That's amazing.
You know you made it when there's like, I'm not even sure how they fit in the graveyard or if they just like broke down the entire city of Chicago.
Wow. The next one is probably a name that all of you are familiar with, even if you haven't heard of some of the women on this list before. I'm sure many of you have heard of Amelia Earhart. I'm very excited that I get to talk about this one because she is my personal favorite historical female traveler. She was born in 1897 and she passed away in 1937. She was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. She grew up in Kansas in the United States, and she was always known for being both a tomboy and a lover of the outdoors. She was a keen reader, and she kept a scrapbook of women who made significant achievements in male-dominated fields. I like to think that because she was born right after Bessie Coleman and she lived a little bit beyond Bessie Coleman, that Bessie Coleman would have influenced her. I think that she would have, especially being in the Midwestern United States as well. She was also a trained nurse. She initially fell in love with flying by watching a flight show, and she got taught by female pioneer pilot Anita Snook. She was able to collect 500 solo hours of flying in just 4 years after getting her license. And as Sophia pointed out about the planes being different, aviation in general was so much different back then. The controls were different. They were all manual. There was no autopilot. You know, everything, the navigation all had to be done manually. It wasn't the highly technological process that it is today that we think of. So for her to accomplish that many hours in that short of a time span, doing all of those things manually and to cross the Atlantic manually as well, is why she has stood the test of time and has stood out among travelers, male and female. So in 1928, she did her first Atlantic crossing by plane. And in 1932, it was her first solo flight across the Atlantic. She left from Newfoundland, Canada, aka Wineland, and she went to Derry, Ireland. In 1937, she planned to fly around the globe and cover 29,000 miles. And it would have been the first flight close to the equator. So basically, she wanted to fly at the widest part of the Earth, which is as close to the equator as possible. But she disappeared as part of that flight. She was flying from Lae, which is in Papua New Guinea, to Howland Island, which is part of the Phoenix Island archipelago. Obviously, there's been a lot of controversy around her disappearance. People always, like, what happened to her? She was never found. I don't think she was ever found. So there's people always like to say, oh, she went missing in the Bermuda Triangle. She was nowhere near the Bermuda Triangle. But that's always a rumor that I've heard, is that
Yes,
got sucked into the Bermuda Triangle, even though she was quite literally like across the world from where the Bermuda Triangle is located. But nonetheless, she did disappear. I do not believe that she's ever been found. She was a very strong supporter of equal rights for women, and she wrote books about her flights. So Amelia Earhart, again, out of everybody in this list, probably one that almost everybody has heard of, and a very influential female traveler.
Definitely. Now we're getting more modern and modern. Next, we have Yoko Tabe, who lived from 1939 to 2016. She's known as the first woman to summit Everest and ascend the 7 summits, which are the highest peaks on each of the 7 continents. Yoko is a Japanese mountaineer, an author, and a teacher. She started at the age of 10, where she went on a class trip mountaineering, and she absolutely loved it. Later on, she studied English and American literature to become a teacher. But she also kept on her love for mountaineering and joined a number of men's climbing clubs before establishing her own women's mountaineering club, because some of the men just straight out refused to climb with her. She also worked as an editor for the Journal of the Physical Society of Japan, and she also led many expeditions. For example, she led the expedition to successfully summit Annapurna 3 for the first time with an all-women and all-Japanese team. Also, she did a lot of environmental conservation and some cleanup climbs, especially in Japan and the Himalayas, with her husband and children. Now, that's some wholesome, eco-friendly family activity if I've ever seen one.
Come on, kids, let's go clean up today. Let's go clean up the mountains.
Yep. She also did a guided annual group excursion to Mount Fuji for school children that were affected by the Great East Japan earthquake. After her death, a mountain range on Pluto was named in her honor. So if you're looking up at the stars tonight, you can think of Yoko Tabe.
Next up, we have Carla Perez. She was born in 1982, and she's still alive today. Speaking of K2, she is the first woman to summit Everest and K2 in 1 year. So for those of you who don't know, Everest is obviously the tallest mountain in the world. It's in the Himalayas on the border of Nepal and China. K2 is another Himalayan mountain that is not quite as tall as Everest, but K2 is often referred to actually as being more deadly and even more dangerous than Everest is. And Everest is pretty deadly, pretty dangerous. K2 is kind of often thought of as the other kind of big mountain to climb in the Himalayas besides Everest. So summiting either one of them on its own is a major accomplishment. She did 2 in 1 year. She was the first woman from the Americas to summit K2 without any supplemental oxygen, which again, K2 is often referred to as even more deadly or even more dangerous than Everest. So that is not a small accomplishment. She was inspired by her dad, who took her on a 14,000-foot volcano in Ecuador. She was also the first Latin American woman to summit Everest without oxygen. So she's now summited both Everest and K2 without oxygen. She summited 5 of the 8,000ers.
There are 14 high peaks in the world. All of them have their summits at over 8,000 meters, which roughly translates to about 26,000 feet or so. So there are 14 peaks that are all over 8,000 meters. So the fact that she has climbed 5 of them, 5 of those 14, any one of those 14 is a huge accomplishment. 5 of them is a major, major accomplishment.
She did a solo ascent of Cho Oyu without supplemental oxygen or Sherpa support.
Yep.
So she is badass. An extreme mountaineer, extreme badass. You can actually follow her on Instagram at carla.perez.ec. So go check her out. I'm sure she's got something else big in the works. But really, like I can't imagine doing those climbs with any, like, all of the amenities, all of the oxygen, all of the Sherpa support. The fact that she just does that without oxygen, without Sherpa support is unbelievable. So Carla Perez, check her out on social media, see what she's up to.
Maybe we can have her on a future podcast episode.
I would love to have her on a future podcast episode.
Because the next person we will have on a future podcast episode, it's Evita Robinson. She was born in 1984, and she's known as the pioneer of the Black travel movement. She grew up in New York State, but lived in Paris, Japan, and Thailand as well. She studied film. She started a web series named No Madness TV about her solo travel experiences. And this then grew to No Madness Travel Tribe Facebook group, which is a virtual community and the first of its kind targeting Black and brown millennials due to the lack of representation they have in the travel world and the media. And their aim is, of course, to make travel more accessible, traveling the world more visible to people of color. The group is currently at 28,000 members from many countries, but they do have a high percentage of female members as well. Just like we're a female-only group, kind of, ish. The No Madness Travel Tribe also hosted a festival for Black and brown travelers called the Audacity Fest. Evita personally is also a contributing editor of the Condé Nast Traveler magazine. She's a keynote speaker, a media personality, a TED resident, that's the capital TED, not some guy named Ted, a consultant for destination marketing organizations, and just overall inspirational. You can follow her on Instagram at EVRobbie, that's EVIE ROBBIE. And hopefully, stay tuned, we'll have her on one of the future episodes.
Yes, I'm so excited to have her come on the episode. This has been a really great episode. I think we've really taken a deep dive into a lot of historical female travelers, you know, some of them more well-known than others, but all of them equally important in shaping travel for females into what it is today. So I'm also looking forward to talking to Evita in the next several weeks. So I hope you tune back in and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
What the f***?
Welcome back to What the... You get the point. The segment of this podcast where you get taught swear words in different languages. Today, since this episode is all about history, I'll teach you some Old English swear words. Let's start with wiffle waffle. Wiffle waffle. Not like the waffle to eat something, but waffle used to mean doing nothing of importance. And wiffle is making a very soft sound, so you're being quiet, not doing stuff. You're being a time waster. Or, well, not you, but the person you're insulting. Then there's something longer, which was said by Theodore Roosevelt. A mind that functions at 6 guinea pig power. I love that. It's a very nice way of saying not much is going on in the person's brain. So it's a mind that functions at 6 guinea pig power. Because usually stuff is measured in horsepower, not guinea pigs. And with that, I'll leave you until we hear each other again. If in the meantime you want to teach me some swear words in your favorite languages, come over to Instagram and yell at me at Sophia AEZ. Sophia with a PH. Bye!
Snack attack!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another segment of Snack Attack. This is the part of the podcast where I try foods from all over the world and I let you know what I think of them. Today, I have some snacks from Finland, courtesy of my lovely co-host Sophia, who got them for me while she was there on a recent trip in her van. Thank you, Sophia. So there's 2 things that I have to try from Finland today, and I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I am not 100% sure exactly what they are because the labels and the packaging are in Finnish, which I do not speak or read. I do have pictures of both of these snacks on my Instagram at Carli Sees the World, CARLI, if you want to check them out. The first one, to my knowledge, is a gummy. It's like a green, kind of a round, almost like a gumdrop shaped gummy. And it's got a white powder on it. So what I assume is that it's going to be some sort of like sour gummy. And I think that it's licorice flavored. So we're going to try. It's very chewy. I'm having a hard time like pinpointing what flavor this is. It's good though. I think it's licorice because licorice isn't something I eat normally. And normally I'm very good at pinpointing what flavor something is. So I think the fact that I don't know what it is signifies that it probably is licorice of some sort. It's not bad. I actually am not a huge fan of licorice. So the fact that I kind of like this is surprising to everybody, including myself. I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 5. The second thing, I'm also not quite 100% sure what it is. It's a chocolate candy and it's kind of got this like jelly kind of a filling in the middle. And I, again, All I can smell is the chocolate. I don't know like what flavor this jelly in the middle is going to be. So we're going to see. It really is like a jelly. The texture is almost as if anybody's ever had a Jaffa cake, how it's kind of like solidified, kind of gelatinous. I also can't pinpoint the flavor on this one. I'm kind of getting orange though. But again, it's very mild. It might also be licorice, like anise, which is just a flavor that I'm very unfamiliar with in general. Because the jelly is kind of green. This is really good actually though. I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5. Only because I don't 100% know what it is that I'm eating. But I really like it. And that is a hit from Finland. If you have a suggestion on where I should try snacks from, feel free to send me a message on Instagram at Carli Sees the World. Carli spelled Carli. And I can't wait to see you next time. Bye. All right. Sorry, Sophia. That's all for this episode. If you'd like more Away She Goes in your life, make sure to stop by heradventures.com/podcast. That's where you can fill out a form if you're interested in being a guest on the show. And you can also write to us at awayshegosgwt@gmail.com or leave us a message on our Google voicemail from any phone or computer at 1-563-503-6323. To follow our adventures, you can follow me on Instagram at Carli Sees the World. Carli is spelled Carli.
You can also follow me at Sophia AEZ. Sophia is spelled Sophia. Away She Goes is part of Her Adventures, a community dedicated to radically redefining travel to be inclusive, sustainable, and empowering. You can learn more about Her Adventures, find travel tips and support, shop travel-themed items made by our members, and join our Facebook group with nearly 100,000 women all around the world. All at heradventures.com. We can't wait to connect and explore with you. Away she goes.